Hi, this is Becky with Icing on Top Becky's Cakes, and today we're going to do marbled buttercream. Now you might remember this cake I did before when I showed you the marbled candy melt sale. So we did the marbled candy melt sale, but the actual video I wasn't able to upload. But I'm going to show you the difference between these two marbled cakes. I used two different methods, almost the exact same, just a different material for wrapping. Now the first one I did was the black and white one on the left, and the one that I used for wrapping was wax paper. Now wax paper, as you can imagine, is very hard to pick up with a bunch of buttercream on. So this time I used this acetate, which is a lot sturdier when you have to pick up and press it onto a cake. And so I decided to try that this time, because if you would have seen me picking up the wax paper with a bunch of buttercream on it and try to stick that onto the side of the cake, well, it was pretty humorous to see. And I really should have posted the video just for that. But I did get it on the cake, obviously, as you see. It's just very difficult. You have to hold it just right, taunt at both ends, and then slowly bring it up and make sure that the base is very level as you press it in. But I'm going to use a little tape to stick my acetate down onto a piece of wax paper that's larger than the acetate. And so I'll just stick it in place so that it stays there when I'm spreading the buttercream on it. Now there's pros and cons to using the wax paper or using the acetate. As I already said, the wax paper is just a little harder a lot harder to pick up and stick on the side of a cake. But it's got smoother results once you peel it off. The acetate is easier to press on the cake and is pretty simple, but you're gonna have a little more of a textured buttercream when you're done. And that's the only drawback, unless you really like having that little bit of texture there. So that's really the only difference, but the acetate is definitely much easier. So first, as you can see, I'm gonna go ahead and put some white buttercream in here, and then I have some dark colors of buttercream ready to fold into my white. I definitely do not wanna mix it well at all when I put my dark colors in, because then that'll ruin the whole marble effect. So in a separate bowl, I have a very dark dusty rose, and then I have a paler color dusty rose, and an even paler color after that. And I'm just gonna scoop those three colors together on my spatula, kind of just scoop them up, make sure I have a good portion of the dark and some of the lighter colors in there, and I'm going to scoop it and then just fold it gently onto the white there. And then once I have all the colors kind of swirled together, then I'm going to rub it back and forth onto my acetate. I get the corners and the sides, and on this end I'm going to get all the way to the edge. On the other end, I'm not going to get all the way to the edge. I'm going to get it closer to the edge, but that's going to be the side that I'm going to use to wrap over the excess. Now I'm making sure I get it all the way down to the very bottom, but it doesn't have to be all the way to the top because I have a shorter cake. And so I'm just moving the buttercream all the way down to the bottom of my acetate, and it's okay if it touches the wax paper right underneath. You want to kind of overlap down there to make sure you get it all the way to the bottom, because when we lift up our acetate, it'll just leave the buttercream on the wax paper, so that makes it really nice. Now it's okay if you're smoothing it back and forth on here, as long as the side that you've already pressed down doesn't have the colors mixed. It'll of course look mixed on this side because we're smoothing back and forth, and we definitely want to smooth back and forth because that'll give us a smoother finish when we put it on the cake. And we also want to get it as even as possible. We just want to make sure that we keep our buttercream even and not too thick, because if it's too thick, you're going to have trouble lifting it, and also your buttercream will be too thick on your final cake. So you want to make sure that it's just a thinner layer of buttercream, but not so thin that you can see through to the other side. And Sometimes I go at it at different directions, side to side, up and down. You just want to make sure that it gives you that nice different swirl each time you go, so it looks really marbled. And now that we're done, we're just gonna even it all out so that it's completely smooth and easy to put on our freshly coated buttercream cake. It's I always use a freshly coated, crumb-coated buttercream cake because that makes it easier to stick to. Fresh buttercream just acts like glue, and so anytime I have to stick another buttercream something, whatever it is, onto my cake, whether I'm piping or doing something like this, I always make sure I have a freshly coated buttercream cake so that it'll stick to it and not fall off. And because that would be really sad if it fell off after all that work. So I'm going to pick it up, holding it as tautly as possible from both sides, and I'm going to put it right on the cake. I'm going to start right about here on the end that has the buttercream coming all the way to the end, and then also make sure that the bottom stays parallel with the bottom here. And see, it's kind of riding up here. I'm going to have to bring that down. And that's the nice thing that, like I said, that it's on acetate because you can move it around a lot easier than if it's on wax paper. So I brought this side all the way around to the side that was buttercreamed all the way to the edge. I'm smoothing it with my fondant smoother to make sure that it sticks to the cake better. And as you can see, this is just beautiful marbling. You can just see through it and it looks amazing. I love marbling. It gives you such a cool effect. So I'm just going to smooth it with my fondant smoother, just pressing it into the cake. We're going to cut off this excess here in a minute. I'm just making sure that it's as long as I want it to be before I cut it. And sometimes you have those little air bubbles, and that's why we use the fondant smoother to get out any bubbles that could be there before we cut it and get rid of the excess. I'm going to smooth it back and forth all the way around, and then I'm going to press it around, make sure it's all stuck to the cake exactly how I want it. Then we're going to take our scissors and just cut straight down right through there, and then we're going to press it again with our fondant smoother to make sure that that stays right where we want it to do. Once we're finished smoothing it out, I'm going to pop it in the freezer for about 45 minutes till that buttercream is nice and solid. And then I'm going to peel it off. Now if it comes off too tacky and you see that it's not coming off right, stick it back in the freezer for another half an hour or so. You want to make sure that it stays on as much as possible. And then we're just going to peel this back. And like I said, it's a beautiful marble finish. If you want it even smoother, you might want to try the wax paper, but it's very challenging, the wax paper, so fair warning there. But I think this gives a very beautiful marble buttercream look, and this is really a fun way to go. I'm going to trim around the top for that excess buttercream that we have on top, and I'm going to use a hot knife. So I'm going to use my torch for this part, but if you don't have one of these blow torches on hand, you can also just heat it in some boiling water. Just wipe off the water with a paper towel before you start cutting around the top, and it'll just cut off real smooth for you. And I love this part because the possibilities are endless. You can go wavy, you can go straight and be smooth, or you can go jagged with this depending on what kind of look you're going for. Like for the black and white one, I went more jagged because I wanted to have a broken marble wall feel. This one's more of a classic marble wall feel, so I'm going a little wavy with it. And so the possibilities are endless and really depends on what kind of cake you're going for. So I'm just going to cut around the top here with my hot knife and scoop it off as I go. Now after this part, you can be done, or you can add accents to it, which is what I love doing. On my black and white one, I added silver accents. On this one, I wanted to add a rose gold accent. And for both of these, I used the diamond dust from the Sugar Art store. It's 100% edible and it's really awesome. It's a powder though, so you're gonna want to make it into a paint form. I used a little bit of clear vanilla because it's what I have on hand usually, but you can use Everclear or something. So this is my rose gold right here. And yeah, it's the Sterling Pearl. That's the line of the powders that I like to use for this. And it's really, really great. So I'm gonna mix this in. I made it into a nice paint, and I'm using my Wilton paintbrush here. It's a food safe paintbrush, so you don't get bristles in your buttercream, because that would be bad. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint it around the top, all the way around, and then I'm also gonna paint accents throughout the cake to kind of highlight some of those really cool marble looks. So the cake looks great just like this, but if you wanted to add extra elements to it by adding the candy melt sail on top like you saw on the black and white one, that's a really fun thing to do. And if you want to see that tutorial, just check out my candy melt, how to make the marbled candy melt sail. That's really fun to put on top and really add something to the cake too. For this one, I was just going for a minimalistic kind of look. But if you're looking for something a little more cool, snazzy, snazzy, we still use that word, I don't know. But yeah, totally check out that candy melt sail. It's just a fun thing to do, and it's really not that hard, but it definitely adds something to the cake. So I really appreciate you guys watching these tutorials with me, and if you want to subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome. Thanks for joining me today.